this video is all about wiring up the Inova system. Now, if this intimidates you, or this intimidates you, then this is probably not for you. But to be honest with you, Thomas provides you most of what you need. I think he did a pretty good job here on the wiring. In some cases, it was a little tight, cramped, not easy to work around this space. But frankly, if you've got the right tools, and I'm going to supplement some things I learned during this that I'll share with you, that'll make this go much easier for you. So let's start with what you need, and that is the documentation, the tools and equipment, and just basically some things to know before you get started that I learned afterwards. So let's get to it. So the first piece of documentation that you need to have in front of you is the written wiring instructions. Now these are included in the instruction packet that comes with this, and I actually forgot about this. So when I started and just worked out the wiring schemas, some things weren't clear, and then Thomas brought to my attention that I needed to look in the special instructions. And they provide details on the wires used in each bundle, especially if you're building it yourself as well, and then some supplemental instructions that help clarify on the video assembly instructions. The second piece of documentation is what I referred to as what they're called the wiring schemas, as he calls them. And these are the top panel and back panel. And if you're familiar with wiring diagrams, these help you see where each wire goes to from component to component, and that helps you keep track and trace your line. Now, as I had mentioned at the end of my last video, I believe I said I actually printed these schemas up into large scale prints and then connected them all together and put them up on the wall so that I could more easily reference these connections. That made it very easy. I also downloaded these wiring schemas. They're PDF files. I also downloaded them on my iPad, so when I was down on the ground in the back, I could also refer to it and zoom in and out as well as needed. So that's the second piece of documentation. The third piece is actually the reason I call it documentation, but it's included in the video instruction. And Thomas, there's a link, and you link to it right here, and it says real photos, and it shows you photos of his unit, so you can kind of reference to see how he routed things and moved things on the board, and if you had any questions about how something connected. So it was definitely helpful, and you can actually, I would actually copy those photos, take a picture of them, your iPad, your phone, and then that way you can zoom in and out of them to see that wiring as well, and the actual that he did. And then the last documentation would be the routing pictures. So these are links in the online video instructions, and then you can get a visual of the wiring routing. Now, it just shows a red line to show the trace and not the actual connections. But it's very helpful to reference these for every wiring bundle, and kind of you'll use them with the real photos to kind of help validate what he's done, and it's just very helpful overall. So those would be the four pieces of documentation you need to look through, read through, probably before you even get started, just so you're kind of familiar with what it's asking for. So there's some tools and equipment that you're going to need for this project and the wiring. So you're going to need a small Phillips or a small flat tip screwdriver. The small tip screwdriver is included. There's terminals that you need to tighten or loosen to get the wiring in. You're going to need some wire strippers. Those are not included, and then the wire cutters are included. Obviously, the wire strippers just make it a lot easier. You're going to need, it includes zip ties, and zip tie holders are included, but I would get some more holders. I got actually some cable holders and on Amazon, because for the larger cables that help hold them down. And then lastly, you're going to need a multimeter, and preferably one with the audio continuity sound, so you can obviously, if you have continuity, and obviously to test to make sure you don't have any shorts between live and ground and live and neutral and so forth. So these are essential. The multimeter is definitely essential, and you'll be using that a lot during this process. It'll just give you a peace of mind as you go along. So there are some things to know before you get started here. So the natural tendency is to just start with the written instructions here and start with bundle A, then B, etc. But don't do that. Start with all the large cables, the HDMI, USB, that you need to route through, because most of these wires and cables go through the wire clip holders, and once you get most of the wires through, there's no room to fit the larger cable ends. And so you'll see on mine, I actually routed the larger cables, the 3 of them, I had to route them down the back side of the unit. Nothing big deal, but just you're going to find that it gets pretty tight pretty quick. You're going to want to organize and zip tie as you go along to keep things orderly and just out of the way. I mean, make sure everything is tied down to the cabinet. When you install the top panel with fans, you'll realize there could be a potential interference of wires if they're not routed and tied down away from the electronic boards. So definitely be very diligent. When inserting bare wire into terminals, ensure the wire can't pull out after tightening the screw by just giving it a gentle pull. So, because sometimes the wire may go under the clamp and never tighten up, especially when you're in some of these cramped, tight positions and you're trying to get that wire in there. That happened to me a couple times actually. Don't route any wires or cables underneath or across the aluminum support profiles in the bottom of the unit, because what I found out, a couple I thought I was following the routing, and I don't think I was 100%. And so what ends up happening is when you install the bottom HPL panels, you don't want anything that is between that panel and those profiles. So you don't want anything to pinch and bind any of the wires. And I actually had to cut some cutouts in the bottom panels to allow for the cables and wirings to not get pinched between the HPL panel. When you're wiring, if you're not familiar with AC wiring, so all the heaters, thermistors, halogen lamps, they have 2 wire leads basically. And when you hook up with, usually the live wire is brown and the blue wire is neutral, so it doesn't matter which wire goes to which. One wire goes to live, one goes to neutral, and it's pretty easy. Electricity flows from live to neutral, so it's going to find the right path. When you tighten connectors on the wire leads, make sure no wire sheathing is interfering. You want to make sure you have good contact with that wire and that the sheathing is not trapped in there that could cause some issues. And then lastly, check for continuity and shorts across all connections, especially going from the top panel to the back panel. Once again, it gives you a sense that you've got good connections, everything's hooked up properly, and you don't obviously going to have any issues when you fire this thing up. And then double check all your connections. I went through that wiring schema literally about 3 times just to verify I had each wire going to the correct location, and just double, triple checking. It just gives you, once again, a peace of mind, and I highly recommend that. This is not something you want to rush. If you're the sort of person that wants to rush through this and just get it all hooked up, you'll probably have issues. And when you do have issues that not organized, you'll have troubles probably isolating those and getting them fixed. So take your time and double check, triple check, quadruple check. All right, so when you get your unit, you'll find a big box that says wiring. When you open it up, you'll see that Thomas has bundled each one of these into bundles with the lettering that we talked about earlier. Now I'm just going to go through not the order that you install these, but just the order that are on the wiring, and some are pretty self-explanatory. So I'm just going to tell you things that I learned on each bundle. So bundle A is considered the main power. You'll see a bunch of wires, and there's 2 brown wires that are actually bundled with this, and it's really not necessarily that clear, I thought initially, on where those went, but you need to actually go down into the written instructions where it says soft switch, because the 2 brown wires actually are for the soft switch instructions, and these connect to the green and yellow wires as you see on the picture here, and you use the one-on-one WAGO connectors that's in the kit as well. So, and then one brown connects to the main SSR, and the other brown wire goes to the live splitter on the back panel. So, and then then of course then the other wires are pretty self-explanatory that go from the splitters back to the soft switch and the 24-volt power supply. The bundle B, the halogen, so you'll see 4 sets of brown wire and blue neutral wires, or different lengths. Now when you route these are actually unique. They actually come through the back, and then they go through the top cover and then inside into where the main chambers are. So you'll route those as you see here, and leave those hanging inside the case until you're ready to hook up the halogens heaters, which are actually near the end. And the length of each brown blue pair will determine which halogen heater socket it connects to, so you won't know that. So you'll just hook up the back at this point. The bundle C1 and C2 are pretty self-explanatory. It just has to do with using the buck transformer there. Bundle C3 is pretty self-explanatory, and I think bundle C4 is pretty self-explanatory. I didn't see bundle D1. I thought was pretty easy to understand. I would say that bundle, and when you bundle D2, these are the heater SSR signals. These are the chamber heaters and the top heater panels that you installed. And just when you look at the wiring scheme, you can see that the SSRs, powder 1, 2, 3, 4 are the first 4, and the printer 5, 6, 7, 8 are the next 4, and then you got the powder bed and print bed. And those go up to the gate 1 with those little yellow wires that you see here. Just make sure then you take powder 1 as you identify, and then it goes to the gate 1 board where it's labeled SSR1 and so forth, SSR2, and then there's different lengths of these yellow wires, so you'll just kind of have to gauge which one is the best length to go from the SSR up to the gate 1. And then there's one yellow wire that's the power signal, so it's separate, and you'll see it goes over here to the main power SSR, and then to the gate 1 SSR PW terminal. The bundle E, the switches, I think these are relatively pretty easy. You'll see that the laser safety key, obviously this one goes up to the laser safety key at the front panel. You see the routing on this one is pretty simple. The top cover, obviously this is the switch. This is one wire that'll go up to the switch that when your top cover's down it'll detect. And then you've got one that's for the powder chamber that goes to the overflow at the bottom, so if your overflow container is not in there, that switch will not be engaged, and so it won't work. It'll detect if it's missing. And then obviously you got one switch that goes to the top laser, to that little switch attached to the galva holder. The laser power, so when you take out the laser and you look at the wiring there, in the instructions it talks about preparing the cable. Well, if you bought the kit like myself, it's already prepared in the kit. And you'll see, just note that the red and the black wires on the laser, they go to different boards. So the red goes to the gate 1 controller, and the black goes to the Blue Tree SKR board. So there's 3 stepper motors. As you recall, you got your recoder stepper motor that's on the outside of the unit here. And the recoder connection could be inserted either way into the board on the SKR board. And so if you look at this here, it tells you in the instructions that with the SKR lettering facing you from top to bottom, then the connection should be black, green, red, blue in the wiring. Now what's interesting, for the Z1 and Z2 stepper motors, you actually need to connect these extensions to them. And you'll notice that they can go in, they can connect, the extensions can connect to the stepper motors either direction. And if you logically think, oh, the black goes to black and the others don't match up, don't do that. It's actually reversed, because the other end of the connector goes into the SK board, and for it to properly fit, you actually end up having to reverse. So the red wire hooks to the black, the blue to the green, green to the red, black to the blue, so forth. So that when you insert it, everything will be in the correct orientation as the other one. It's a little hard to explain, but these pictures should explain it. So if you hook it up like this, you'll be fine. The thermal camera wiring, the pinout it's not shown anywhere. I had to send a note to Thomas, and so so take a look at this picture here. But when you face the Gate 1 controller board with the SSR signals at the top there, the pins insert from top to bottom: green, purple, blue, yellow. Okay, the Raspberry Pi, there's a 6-inch HDMI adapter, so it's a micro USB to HDMI, and that actually attaches to the HDMI output on the Raspberry Pi. So the HDMI output on the Raspberry Pi is a micro USB. So there's that little, so you use that little 6-inch adapter to go from micro to HDMI, and then you have a 3-meter HDMI to HDMI cable then that connects to that adapter, and it routes to the front panel display. And then there's a 180-degree HDMI adapter that's used to connect to the display. There's 2 double stack USB ports on the Raspberry Pi. So the USB on the left, you use a short little USB to USB that connects to the SKR board here. And then there's a 3-meter USB to micro USB that goes to the 0-1 board on the back panel. And then the USB on the right, there's 2 3-meter USB. One has a 3-meter USB that it has a 90-degree USB adapter that goes to the front display. And then there's just a 3-meter USB to USB that goes to the front panel. Keep aware of the 50-centimeter orange ribbon from the camera, the Raspberry Pi camera that connects, because the initial routing, pay attention to the routing, because this can't interfere with the fan, and I still gonna have to make some adjustments on mine because it still kind of sticks up, and I don't want to put that top cover. I don't want to have any interference there. When you read the instructions for the fan hub, it's already prepared properly. In the instructions, it talks about clipping this and resheathing this. If you bought the kit like myself, you don't need to modify anything. You just connect all those fan connectors to the hub and then stick the hub to the panel there. Now, the one thing it doesn't say about the fan hub is that the red wire and the black wire that comes out of that fan hub, it doesn't say where they go. And those will go into the red wire will go to the 12-volt splitter on the top panel, and the black wire goes to the ground splitter that you see there. Now, a green wire is included with the main switch, and it goes from the ground splitter to the chassis screw. Now, if you look at his photos, he just shows you inserting that wire between the screw and the chassis. I don't like the way that did. It was actually kind of difficult, so I just crimped on a ring terminal that's not included in the kit at the end of that wire, and then I attached to the chassis screw, which made it a lot easier to install. You'll find then there's a lot of little jumper cables that basically go from SSR to SSR. In black, there's red, and there's brown little jumper wires, I call them. And this is just solid core wire. They're already bent into shape. So just take a look at the real photos. You can kind of see where they're at, and just put them where shown. But they're already bent as needed, which I really thought was very, very helpful. So overall, that's kind of the special ones you need to know in this kit. Other than that, I think everything else is pretty self-explanatory.